This is a world where nothing costs money. That morning, Nobita handed his mom a stack of cash, but she flew into a rage. She opened a cabinet packed with money and cried, "Our family is already poor enough. Stop bringing more money home." Just then, Nobita's dad rushed through the front door. He said he had just run into a thief. The thief had forced 100,000 yen into his bank account. It all started earlier that day. Nobita wanted to buy a toy he had always dreamed of, so he asked Doraemon to use the what-if phone booth to create a world where money was worthless. The two of them went to a toy store to test it out. Nobita grabbed the toy and started walking out. The shop owner immediately chased after them. They thought the gadget had failed, but then the owner handed Nobita 20,000 yen. That's when Doraemon finally understood how this world worked. Not only was everything free, people actually paid you to take things away. Nobita emptied the bookstore of every comic book. Then they cleared out an entire vending machine. After that, they loaded up a cart full of toys. By the time they finished, their pockets were overflowing with cash. When they got home, they found Nobita's mom worrying about the family's finances. Trying to help, Nobita handed her another stack of bills. Instead of thanking him, she scolded them even harder. She explained that their family was poor precisely because they had too much money. Even paying someone to hire you had strict limits. Only then did they realize the truth. In this world, the more money you had, the poorer you were. Even when a robber holds up a bank, he demands that all the cash be deposited into his account. Nobita and Doraemon were stunned. Meanwhile, Sunio was showing off his gold watch. He proudly claimed that his family was poor, while Nobita came from a wealthy family. Hearing that, Nobita felt completely embarrassed. Then he came up with an idea. He and Doraemon went to the park. They planned to bury all of their cash underground. But while digging, they uncovered a lost handbag. It was stuffed with even more money. A police officer happened to see them. Nobita grabbed the bag and ran. The officer chased after him. During the escape, they accidentally knocked into a passerby. They also smashed an antique vase. As compensation, they were forced to accept 100 million yen. Just then, the police officer finally caught up with them. As punishment, Nobita was fined another 200 million yen. With no other choice, the two carried mountains of cash back home. When Nobita's mom saw the money, she completely broke down. Desperate to solve the problem, his dad bought a lottery ticket. He hoped it would somehow wipe out their debt. No one expected it to work, but after checking the numbers, they discovered they had actually won the jackpot. Thanks to the prize, every last pile of cash in the house disappeared. Nobita had finally had enough of this upside-down world. He immediately used the what-if phone booth to restore everything back to normal. To make sure the world was truly back to normal, he walked into the toy store again. He grabbed a toy and tried to leave without paying. He even demanded that the shop owner pay him instead. The furious owner immediately taught him a painful lesson. Even though Nobita got beaten up, he couldn't have been happier. Just how terrifying is Musashi's pressure? With just a single fart, he made Oliva break out in a cold sweat. Even though they were standing far apart, Oliva could still clearly feel just how powerful Musashi was. He could even see it with his own eyes. The invisible blade that Musashi had conjured in his hand. It seemed Oliva was still too weak, but Baki showed no fear at all. He mocked Musashi, telling him he might as well use the two real swords on his back. The moment Musashi heard that, he exploded with rage. Everyone who had ever believed they could defeat him simply because he wasn't holding a sword had been crushed. But Baki said he wasn't looking down on Musashi. Whether Musashi had a sword or not, he was going to defeat him completely. The moment he finished speaking, Baki unleashed a spinning kick. Yet the kick only grazed a single strand of Musashi's hair. Musashi instinctively touched the cut on his cheek and calmly stated that Baki's leg had already been severed. Only then did Baki finally realize what had happened. The next instant, Musashi drove a brutal kick straight into Baki's face. Fortunately, he snapped out of it quickly, flipped backward, and landed firmly on his feet. Ironically, Musashi had once told Baki that only fools relied on kicks. Yet now, Musashi himself was using them. More importantly, he had once been kicked in the groin by Yujiro Hanma, and Musashi had heard that Baki had defeated Yujiro. That alone earned Baki his respect, but Baki simply replied that he had never acknowledged that victory. That answer surprised Musashi. It was the first time he had ever met someone who refused to accept their own win. Musashi let out an awkward cough. Then, that terrifying aura exploded from his body once again. At the same time, Baki settled back into his fighting stance. It felt like a continuation of Musashi's battle against Yujiro Hanma. The difference was, this time, no one would be there to protect Baki. After all, Moto had already been defeated by Musashi. The next second, Musashi launched himself forward like a cannonball, but Baki suddenly vanished right before his eyes. It turned out that Baki's cockroach dash was even faster. Before anyone could understand what had happened, Musashi had already been knocked to the ground. Only true martial artists could see what really occurred. In that brief instant, Baki had thrown 3 punches. One hit Musashi's face, one struck his chest, and the last landed directly in his groin. Using the cockroach's ability to reach maximum speed instantly, without any running start, combined with perfect force transmission, Baki pushed the power of his attack to its absolute limit. To Musashi's shock, Baki had simultaneously employed 3 different modern fighting techniques. Musashi was completely stunned. What he couldn't understand was why Baki hadn't killed him. After all, Baki had countless opportunities. Baki simply smirked. He said he would never take that kind of risk, because in a real fight, as long as your opponent isn't completely finished, there will always be unknown variables. The next second, Baki launched another kick, but Musashi avoided it. By now, Musashi had already figured out how Baki moved. From this point on, the battle became a contest of who could predict the other faster. Baki then stepped in close and unleashed a high roundhouse kick. Musashi casually blocked it with a single raised arm. Only after the two separated did the audience finally hear the sound of their exchange. Their attacks had already surpassed the speed of sound. At that moment, Musashi declared that the warm-up was over. He suddenly swung both arms downward. The invisible blade in his hands evolved once again. Not only did it gain real weight, but the light reflecting off its edge became clearly visible. Unbelievably, Musashi's swordsmanship had reached yet another level. Baki knew he couldn't waste any more time. The next second, he charged straight at Musashi. Before every assassination, this hitman must roll a die. The number determines how many shots he'll need to kill his target. This time, the die landed on 4. He loaded a round into the chamber, then aimed his rifle at an empty street. Before the target even appeared, he pulled the trigger. Yet somehow, the bullet hit its mark. For the second shot, Lupin threw himself in front of his partner and took the bullet. But the assassin had no intention of firing the third shot right away. He wanted his prey to suffer. What he didn't know was that his target this time was also a legendary marksman. The moment Jigen saw the bullet, he recognized who the assassin was. It was the same bullet used in the assassination of someone Jigen had once sworn to protect. Realizing that the killer was now coming after him as well, Jigen decided to make the first move. However, when he and Lupin arrived at the assassin's hideout, they were both shocked. The yard was filled with countless gravestones. There was even a gravestone prepared in advance for Jigen. That only strengthened Jigen's determination for revenge. But when the two entered the house, they suddenly heard Fujiko crying for help. It turned out that Fujiko had failed to steal a treasure and had been captured by the assassin. At that exact moment, the killer appeared behind them. But inside such a confined space, Jigen had the clear advantage. After all, his opponent was a sniper. Yet Oki remained completely calm. The moment Jigen reached for his revolver, Oki moved even faster. In an instant, he shot the gun right out of Jigen's hand. It turned out that Oki's bullets had been specially modified. The only reason he hadn't killed Jigen immediately was because he still had one final shot left. Realizing the situation had turned bad, Lupin and Jigen fled, and Oki began his hunt. Soon, the two men reached the harbor and hid behind shipping containers. Meanwhile, Oki set up his sniper rifle from a high vantage point. The moment either of them showed themselves, they would die. Their only chance was to reach the road. On the opposite side, Lupin came up with a plan. When he counted to 3, they would both run at the same time, forcing Oki to split his attention. But Lupin had underestimated just how terrifying Oki really was. He could only watch helplessly as his best friend was killed right in front of him. Determined to avenge Jigen, Lupin made his decision. Yet instead of taking action, he calmly sat down and drank a cup of coffee. Meanwhile, Oki had already positioned himself on a rooftop. He rolled the die once again. This time, the number was 1. He raised his rifle and aimed at Lupin. After calculating the wind, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. The bullet shot forward like a bolt of lightning, but this time, it missed. Instead, a bullet pierced Oki's own chest. He immediately turned around. Standing behind him was none other than Jigen, the man who was supposed to be dead. Then Jigen fired again, hitting Oki directly in the knee. Oki was completely stunned. He had killed Jigen himself. How could he still be alive? Before Oki could react, Lupin's voice suddenly came through his earpiece. Only then did Oki realize he had been tricked. Back when Jigen was first shot, Lupin had already sensed that something wasn't right. Oki had fired into an empty street, yet somehow, the bullet had hit its target perfectly. Lupin looked around and noticed that the entire city was covered with surveillance cameras. That's when he figured it out. Oki had modified his right eye and connected his optic nerve to the city's surveillance network. That way, no matter where his target hid, he could always see them. So on the day Oki attempted to kill Jigen, Lupin hacked the surveillance system. He delayed the video feed that Oki was seeing by half a second. As a result, the bullet had never actually hit Jigen. Oki's greatest weakness was his own overconfidence, and he had walked straight into Lupin's trap. After learning the truth, Oki knew he had lost. He lowered his weapon and asked Jigen to end it with a single shot. But Jigen wanted to defeat his opponent fairly and reclaim the honor that had been taken from him. Oki understood. He loaded his final bullet into the chamber. The real duel was about to begin. The moment the wind stopped, both men fired at the exact same time. But Jigen was still 0.01 seconds slower. Yet in the very next second, Oki's arm was blown apart. It turned out that, although Oki's bullets had been specially modified, their power had been greatly reduced. The instant the two bullets collided, Oki's round was knocked off course. The assassin had finally been defeated.